This week, Clayton Fields and Michael Assraf from Vicarious join us to discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly sides of automated vulnerability remediation. Ming Chow will join us on InfoSec Careers, data privacy, the cloud as a solution or not, and DevOps. In the security news, Nissan source code leaked online, and Ticketmaster fined $10 million for breaking into rival systems, the great iPhone, the great suspender, and the shady zero-day sales game, create your own encryption in Python, and using Google to hack Google. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Want to be more thorough while also working faster? It doesn't matter if you're on the red or blue team, an augmented reality overlay can enable you to be more thorough and faster at the same time. No glasses, no goggles. Polarity delivers this superpower as an overlay on top of your existing workflow and tools. The free Community Edition connects to the data you care about to overlay the context you need to make informed decisions. Apply for early access today at securityweekly.com/polarity. Sophisticated attackers are targeting credentials to escalate privileges. Ativo Networks provides an innovative solution that finds, cleans, and monitors exposed credentials to reduce attack surfaces. Additionally, the solution alerts when attackers try accessing Active Directory objects while hiding data and derailing them with disinformation. Organizations can go one step further and hide real credentials among deceptive lures that lead attackers to decoys for recording TTPs and forensic evidence. Find out more at securityweekly.com/Ativo Networks and sign up for a free trial.
And welcome to the show. But first, let me introduce you a man who gave me sage advice. And that was, just remember, don't make snow angels at the dog park. Mr. Paul Asadorian.
Welcome, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. It's episode number 679, recorded on January 7th, 2021, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. I've got my illustrious co-hosts on the lines remotely. Mr. Jeff Mann is here with us. Jeff, welcome.
Yay, new year. Woohoo.
Jeff, don't sound too excited. We lost music. It's really weird. I think it's because of Johnny's new programming on the board. So, because when all of us have programmed stuff, it always works the first time. So, oh, there you go. Mr. Larry Pesci's here with us. Larry, welcome.
Yes, good to be back. Good to be in the new year. Hey, it's now December 38th. We're good to go.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Mr. Lee Neely is here with us. Lee, welcome.
Hey, good to go. I guess that makes this the day the music died.
In our ears, anyway.
Yes. All perspective.
Mr. Tyler Robinson is here with us. Tyler, welcome.
I don't know about you guys, but the music is always going in my head. Something about that.
Something, and as well as voices as well.
It's usually, I don't know if that's a 5G or maybe it was what told us to go storm the Capitol buildings. I don't know.
And it was that
I thought Tyler,
mysterious,
yours was just
right. That mysterious guitar pedal that was injected inside of you.
I see what you did there.
Do you have a specific guest or topic you'd like us to cover in one of the upcoming shows? You can submit your suggestions at securityweekly.com/guests. We review those on a monthly basis and we'll reach out once we have reviewed them. This segment is sponsored by Vicarious. Please visit securityweekly.com/Vicarious to learn more. Joining us today, no strangers to the show, Clayton Fields and Michael Assraf. Welcome, guys.
Hey, Paul. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, good to have you both on the show to talk about automated vulnerability remediation, the good, the bad, the ugly. Do you want to start with the good, the bad, or the ugly, or something else?
I want to start with the bad.
With the bad,
because we're a positive person. Yeah, with the bad, definitely. So the bad thing is that we can see that even though vulnerability management products and vulnerability scanners and all this hustle has been around for like 2 decades, you have companies that are worth $5 billion on NASDAQ and things like that. We still don't figure that out. We still see that there are many attacks that are originated or involving along the way some software vulnerability that was not patched. Actually, Clayton found some interesting statistics about it. That 60% of attacks originated from software vulnerabilities. So it's something that has been with us for many years, but it looks like we don't. It doesn't seem to figure out yet, and it's starting to shift. But I don't want to get to the good, so I will go to the ugly now. The ugly part is that companies are putting a lot of money. And from researchers, we saw, especially a survey conducted by ServiceNow, the numbers are talking about the fact that companies are spending a lot of money. We have one customer that spends around, and it's not like it's a big environment. It's a big company, but he spends around 1.52 million only for scanning, and he still didn't get to figure everything out. He still has a very lack of visibility, very big lack of visibility over his vulnerabilities. And the good part is that it's starting to shift. I think that also in your show, you can see that there are companies that are starting to change it, both on consolidation side, both on orchestration side. And that's exactly what we're here to discuss today.
I think just to add to what Michael said, we see so many different tools trying to accomplish the objective, and that leaves so many sources of different truth. And different interfaces for different teams. And so you have an incredible amount of complexity in trying to solve this problem. And it really does not support, automation and efficacy when you have so many different tools involved and different teams involved and nobody working from the same source of truth. It becomes very difficult to have the efficacy. And that's why we see better than half the breaches involve some kind of unmitigated vulnerability that could have been remediated, could have been mitigated, but due to some circumstance, and we know there's dozens of circumstances why these things don't get done. But ultimately, we think we narrow it down to just the sheer complexity in the process. And so we want to bring automation and efficacy to that discussion.
Sorry, was Jeff or someone going to say something? No.
Do you want me to say something?
No. I was just, you can if you want, but I was just going to say that it's interesting when I think of the kind of the history of vulnerability management, which really, when you start, is really more about vulnerability scanning, passing around reports, and doing Excel spreadsheets. To a certain extent, a lot of people are still, in that kind of level of maturity in their vulnerability scanning and management programs. But what's interesting is when I worked in vulnerability management, even before I worked in vulnerability management, I was like, this is great. Like, these tools can tell us that there's patches missing and vulnerabilities in my systems. I'm like, why can they help me fix them? It took us a long time, before we got there, and some of the, larger players in the space have added some of those capabilities. Many are still relying on integrations, and I think, Clayton and Michael, to your point, where does that integration kind of train end, right? Because there's so many different ways in which we can remediate those vulnerabilities, especially when we're crossing multiple platforms. Which is one reason why I like the Vicarious solution, because you guys got that out of the gate. When you first came to me, I was like, oh, thank you. Like, that's awesome. This has been my dream for so long, to have this one platform that can identify and fix and do, of course, so much more. And I think that's really the place that we need to be here in 2021, is way higher on that maturity curve when we talk about vulnerability management, because we've got a lot of other things to tackle. And I think that this is a problem that we can sit here today and say, this is solvable. This is something we can do. We can discover and fix and make this process something that it does not require a lot of cycles from the team. I feel like that's what you folks are helping teams accomplish.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Go ahead, Clayton.
Well, absolutely. And there's also an opportunity to bring automation into the discovery phase and the prioritization phase. If we can use automation to gather better machine data, we can drive better priority within the company. We see a lot of mistakes being made in using business risk to translate prioritization in a vulnerability management program. The attacker, doesn't look at the network in this way. They don't look at the network for business risk. They look in the easiest ways to get in, the easiest ways to get persistency, the easiest ways for lateral movement. And so we not only do we want to use automation for remediation, we want to use automation to get better data to make better decisions and drive prioritization the way the red team sees exploiting the network. And we believe that, we're not, foolish to think we can solve everybody's problem, but, better than 50% of the breaches having unpatched vulnerabilities, this number is too big. We think we can easily cut this number down by 75, 80%, and do that through both consolidation and automation.
Michael, sorry, did you have commentary as well?
Yeah, I think back to your question, there are two ways, to handle this problem. Because if we look at historically what happened with vulnerability scanning and vulnerability management, is that we used to have scanners. Like, we used to have environments where you provided them, you would buy a virtual appliance or appliance, it would scan the network, it will generate a huge list of vulnerabilities. Back in the days, the problem was not so big, but now it got bigger because infrastructure become much more complex. Suddenly you have work from home, and you have cloud services, and you have your on-premise environment, etc. So the vulnerability scanning process a little bit got out of control. And then, because we saw that we have so many vulnerabilities on the scanning side, we said, okay, let's have another product that takes the data generated by the scanners, prioritize them because we can't handle everything, and then we're going to take this. Prioritize this curated list of vulnerabilities, and we're going to send it to a different team. So if you come and you put another management tool on top of that, it's like somehow you kind of you kind of making the problem more making the problem more persistent. And what we're saying is something different. We're saying that it's not about the tools. It's not about specific products that are not working properly. It's about the process. The process, the internal process in the organization is kind of broken. You can achieve that with orchestration, but sometimes these kind of solutions also require to have a political change. What we're trying to do is kind of different. We're trying to be a consolidated solution that provide those three silos all together with automation that can reduce the time between the discovery of a vulnerability to the time it's being mitigated, and by doing that, reducing the attack surface and the attack window, which is, as we all know, most of the time it's a matter of time. You need to be faster than your opponents.
It's interesting. I was, and I'll take one of the articles that I was going to cover in the news section, and I want to kind of talk about it here instead, because I think it got me thinking. There's a great 22-page write-up of the zero logon vulnerability. Great write-up, by the way. I mean, Tyler, I don't know if you or anyone else had read that one. I think I read that one before, and it does stand as a really good write-up. I was like, so as a security person, maybe even on the blue team, I've got to read this, I've got to digest it, I've got to figure out how to fix it in my network. To your point, Michael, I have to do the political game and coordination to go, we need to patch this. And my question was like, so how many organizations that did that, maybe you've patched it in your entire environment, but you were also part of the SolarWinds breach, right? And do you want to go back in time in a time machine and take that back and go, maybe that wasn't so important. Maybe we should have focused on some other things, such as threat hunting or something else. But because that process took so long, because we didn't have your tools, right, and mindset of let's prioritize, let's remediate, and let's automate this process in both areas, so that now we have time to focus on things that architecturally can have a greater impact than maybe fixing that, or spending a lot of time spinning our wheels trying to fix one vulnerability because people like us on podcasts and in the news were talking about it, right?
Yeah, we're putting definitely a lot of efforts in the scanning part, and I think that companies still haven't figured out the scanning part because their networks became so complex. Clayton, go. I'm good.
Well, and that's where the machine data comes in. I mean, you can make better prioritization if you have the right data. And I think a lot of people are using data that's not customized to their environment. They're using the subjective data, they're using the raw CVSS data without the temporal environmental attributes calculated correctly. So automation plays a role across the entire process. To Michael's point today, much of this is manual. I mean, everybody we talk to is doing many of these steps manually or subjectively. And we think through that automation, we can improve the time to remediation, which ultimately, what we see right now is 180 days between, the time something is discovered and somebody's actually fixing it. And I mean, that the red teams can do a lot of things in 180 days. So, we need to shrink this down significantly. And then you add to that, the automation can be used for binary analysis, and we can start to deploy patchless solutions that can protect things that historically have not been protected or not even identified until there's already a patient zero. I'm sure nobody wants to be patient zero. So automation plays a huge role in, collecting the machine data, understanding the 0 days that could exist on a binary, and offering vicarious opportunities to protect those things before they're even discovered by the attacker.
I think it's interesting, and I think I touched on this earlier in the week, but now I have the quote in front of me from my friend Dave Vitale that posted on the Daily Dave mailing list. The subject was the lost decade of security metrics, and Dave has a way with words, as many of us who have followed this list and know Dave, and he's talking about CVSS. Dave says, and I quote, "If I took all of the paintings in the world and ran them through a neural network to score them from 1.0 through 10.0, the resulting number would be, like CVSS, useless." I thought Dave summed that up pretty nicely.
His quote is valid because nobody's using the right data for the environmental temporal scoring. So basically, they're taking the raw data. The raw data doesn't apply to them, and so they're making decisions on subjective data. And again, his quote is a great example that automation matters, and getting the right machine data and making the right decisions, it matters. And that's a fantastic quote to apply to this problem, and quite frankly, why Vicarious is in business.
And I like the criteria making it less subjective, because John Strand was on Enterprise Security Weekly this week, like really kind of harping on you have to tie together these low to medium vulnerabilities, and it's super hard to prioritize those in your environment, and software can't help. And I'm like, John, no, software can help, because I think that it can bring forth some of the metrics that you're referring to, Clayton and Michael, is that tell me what software is most used in my environment, both like installed and used the most. I don't know too many folks that are really looking at even just that one metric, because that's new and different. That's something in my career I never had the data or even considered to go, we should focus on software we have, maybe, but what's most used, certainly, and not worry about what CVSS score it got. If most people have this installed and they're using it, we should probably patch it regardless if it's, a 3.0 versus a 7.9. Like, what does that really mean? As Dave Vitale points out, pretty useless, right? But let's patch those so that when John Strand or his team comes along, there are none of those low or medium vulnerabilities on that important software for them to string together.
That's also a key point to bring to light, is that data that's available. Without that data, you don't have the ability to make some of those educated correlations. We spoke about this earlier in the week on ESW, where the business and what is important to the business, how the business makes money, where the sensitive information lives that is vital to both business and reputation, that can be correlated to the software that accesses it, and therefore the machines that access it, and therefore prioritize what needs to be done in order to ensure that that data is safe kept and there's not vulnerabilities for that 5% that may be critical. That 5%, when you take that criticality and that correlation into play, that's when it becomes really vital. And I think that's one of the biggest pieces that Vicarious is bringing, is new insight that then educated people that know the business, know the company, know the environment, can then make good decisions. And when they don't know, there's the analytics and the AI and the data that can help provide some insight and start to push them in the right direction, so they're not wasting valuable time, and they can begin looking at things like least privilege, where that SolarWinds attack, if done right, could have prevented some of the least privilege, or through the least privilege.
Yeah, it's amazing. You guys are all talking about the red team perspective, and when we talk about this conversation with customers, they don't always understand this perspective. I think many people have a blue team perspective. So I think what you guys are talking about right now is this fantastic knowledge transfer for anybody listening. This is how the attacker thinks. This is how they think about getting in the environment, taking what they want, being undetected. So these are fantastic comments.
Yeah, and as for your point, Paul, I think that if you take even a small environment with 200, 300 computers, the amount of vulnerabilities you may find there is huge. So even if let's say that the CVSS model is correct. Let's say that this is the right way to go because it does encapsulate environmental and temporal properties, but having tens of thousands of vulnerabilities and going through each one, and you know what, even if and then you start making yourself assumptions to say, okay, I'm going to go over only the critical ones. So you're going to go only over the critical ones, but it's still a manual labor. The fact that you have something that is continuously running, generating data that is relevant for your threat modeling, it's relevant for your risk modeling, and you constantly correlating it with the environment, meaning that once a vulnerability has been mitigated, the risk is automatically going to get reduced. This is something that even if you have a pretty big team of security analysts or an IT admin or IT team that is very, very responsive for security threats, you're still not going to be good enough as a machine. And that's just the first step. If you're automating also the remediation part, you're going to get a very good resiliency for most of the attack. You're going to increase your cyber hygiene in a very good manner.
And in regards to increasing cyber hygiene, the other thing you can do is understand where applications and patches are crashing and colliding with each other. The automation can allow you to collect all this data and propagate a library of intelligence about how you deal with your environment and where your problem systems are, what applications are the most needy and most sensitive. Automation can collect all this data, build this library for you, help you understand how to actually manage that environment. Where today, when I talk to the largest enterprises, they're building manual scripts. They're trying to document this stuff themselves. They're building labs trying to figure it out. And it's incredibly expensive, incredibly complex. And most of the time stuff's crashing anyway. So through the consolidation and with the automation and the machine data, there's an incredible amount of knowledge you can build about the program without humans. Humans don't have to waste time executing on these topics anymore.
And there's research that backs up much of what we're saying too, right? You can spend a lot of time and have a strategy. Maybe it's based on CVSS. Maybe it's not. Maybe you're trying to base it on things in, passing around spreadsheets or basing it on a certain score and higher. And what some of the research shows is that you could have patched everything CVSS like 8.0 or greater, or you could have patched randomly CVSS, CVEs in your environment, and the end result pretty much is the same, right? Your security posture ends up the same. I buy that, right? I think we spend a lot of time, as we've proved on previous segments, right, being subjective about it and writing scripts and trying to do all these things and convince people that we should patch this versus this, when really it's like none of that matters. We could have patched at random. And without some solid foundation of having a strategy of patching, what's important, what's most likely to thwart attackers, I agree, Clayton. I think it's something that we need computers to help us make those decisions with.
Because it's basically you have too many data points. You have too many data points for this decision. You have the location of the computer in the network. You have the usage of the software, you have open ports, you have so many configuration stuff that are running on the computer that makes a certain vulnerability exploitable or not. But it's something that humans just can't, they can't deal with that. They can't deal with all this information, they can process it. But using machine learning, you can definitely accomplish that. And we showed how we do it in previous segments. And now with automation, we're taking the next step towards not only giving the right visibility and prioritization, but also helping helping companies remediate it in the speed of light. So just having this whole process once and for all, solved without another tool, without another thing that will help me prioritize or will help me remediate or will connect to my scanner. Just one tool that will solve all of this hassle.
curious if so when you say machine learning is speeding some of this up, and the way in which you're doing a lot of that prioritization is through some of this AI analytics, are those data sets and the continual evaluation of the environment, are those continually upgrading via the decision tree or using something like neural net? Like, is that a changing model that is evaluated continuously?
Yes, that's a great question. The way we do that is we've built a MapReduce engine that collects unformatted data from the machines, and it's like we can decide which data is being collected. For example, we want to see which IPs are being accessed by which executables and which users are running a specific process. Because we also have the knowledge of the software structure, and this relates back to our binary analysis and up to our patch list, we can draw a much bigger picture around what this software do. Because we know which processes are attached to each software, we know which libraries are attached to each software, we know the exact structure, we know the disk paths, etc. So that allows us to take all this unformatted data, format it, and then correlate it back to the software, the operating system, or a specific CVE, and then take all of these data points and find interesting clustering, where we can say, okay, we saw that you have 30 machines on your network that has a CVE that has, but it has it's running the software that this CVE is attached to is running frequently, is communicating with the DMZ, and etc. And we're going to tell you, okay, this group of machines impose a great threat on your network, so you probably should take action on this right now. And this is how you're going to do that. You're going to click here, and we're going to tell you, okay, this is the right remediation actions that you need to take, and they will significantly improve your cyber hygiene.
Now, and we have a research team that's constantly adding to these X tags. So, the solution is constantly evolving, constantly growing, becoming more mature. I mean, the more software we see, the more we learn. So, it takes a solid research function, understanding of red team tactic, to build out that model.
Now, does that have the ability to take in and build custom data parts to that based on, say, something like a critical asset within inside the environment? Can you build some structured data around that, where the rules and the unstructured data then can apply and be applied to the ML side of the decision tree?
Yeah, I mean, the customers can decide, how that happens, and they can influence that tagging and give us more information about the assets. So, yeah, there's customization and input that we can always take from the client to try to make better decisions. But ultimately, I think the percentage that's going to move the needle is going to be much smaller than what we're going to initially move the needle at, right? So you're talking about, the last 5% of the spectrum. What we're seeing is, significant hygiene. Like Michael said, I mean, we met with an enterprise who has hundreds of thousands of endpoints, and they're only covering 40% of their environment with vulnerability scanning. And now with COVID, they've got a whole bunch of people remote, and the scanners aren't reaching those people. So, I mean, enterprises have much bigger problems right now than, kind of that last 5% remediation. But we want to be everything to everybody. So we do want to offer that customization and provide the ability for that input. And customers do appreciate that. But again, what they're telling us is that, the basic hygiene, they've got to block and tackle that first.
Yeah, and I think back to your question, I think that it's something that also Jeff has been talking about it regarding tailoring risk modeling for letting the user do his own risk modeling. And most of the vendors in the market don't allow weights and factors on risk modeling. And I want to share like a quick screen that we built recently. Okay, so that screen is basically shows exactly what are the findings that we found for Firefox in this environment. So, for example, we found that it has non-vulnerability. It has some stuff that we found from our 0 days, and it has a bunch of other stuff. We can see that it's doing network usage. Some of the vulnerabilities are requiring user interaction, and we can also see that this is highly used in the environment. So all of the weights that you see here are also editable, because we know that for some organizations, the risk modeling is different, meaning that they care more about other stuff. For example, we had a very interesting POC with a company that is doing energy in the energy field, that is doing SCADA and producing electricity, and they wanted to figure out which of the software they have, which of the executable, and which of their assets are communicating with a specific subnet that is their SCADA interfaces. So if anyone is doing lateral movement, gets to this computer and managing to reach the SCADA interfaces, it's a game over. You cut electricity, just like happened in Ukraine. So yeah, we allow them to add their own data points, and we also allow them to customize the existing risk modeling that they have.
That seems like a pretty big influencer, and from a cost standpoint, or not just checking a box or being compliant, or mitigating with some compensating controls. This actually seems like the attack surface that you are putting priority to from a money and business standpoint, where you've got FTEs, a certain limited number of resources, and a small budget. Like, seems like from a business standpoint, you can very efficiently and effectively prioritize on levels of effort and what needs to be done. You can see whether or not you have enough FTEs, whether you have the ability to even address some of these security concerns. So not just from like a technology standpoint, like from a business standpoint, this seems like it answers and solves a lot of problems that you have no other way to get this kind of data. I'm hard pressed to think of how I would obtain and prioritize something like this in a large scale environment.
Well, customers today tell us they're building manual scripts. They're spending weeks on end, building manual data collection, and then they've got to build verification processes. So just because the vulnerability scanner says you have an issue and you go patch it, did it work? Was it effective? Were there any issues? Now you got to go back, run the scans again. And what if that asset is remote? Now the scanner can't reach it. There's a lot of complexity in what you're describing, and these are all great points.
Also, add on this. I think that at the end, as Clayton said, the customers that do have the capacity to do this kind of things themselves. For example, I visited a very large bank, and I saw that they developed their own prioritization platform because they didn't find any good solution. Of course, it was before Vicarious, but it's a big struggle. The companies that can do it, they're doing it with their own scripts. They're doing it with analysis on their SIM. They're doing it with a lot of data that they're collecting from other agents. But as for like the companies that don't have the capacity, and this is very few companies, this is very, very small amount of companies that can actually build their own product, that can build their own dashboards for vulnerability prioritization. For the rest, it just doesn't happen. As we spoke about it before, most of the companies still prioritize based on CVSS, which, as Paul said before, it's almost random. So that's the very sad truth, and this is basically what's the theme of this discussion today. The process is bad. The numbers are ugly. And something needs to change, and we can see that stuff are starting to move around right now.
Well, and we've seen a generation 2 of this and the business risk prioritization tools, but I think Vicarious is really Gen 3. We understand the business risk, but we also have to, again, have that machine data and apply that red team perspective, and automation is the way to do it. We don't have any technical debt that we've got to manage. We are cloud first, cloud ready, able to grab that machine data, do all the prioritization, remediation recommendation automatically. It's really a streamlined solution. One of the customers deployed a few hundred endpoints recently and said it was the easiest solution they've ever had to deploy. I don't know about you, but sitting on the phone and listening to that, it was very exciting.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I like the dashboard with Firefox because I think that for me, we got really caught up in SolarWinds, right? But if we remember, just before that, there was the documentation of this phishing attack that was executed reportedly by Russia that had 0 days for
web browsers, right? And whether it's a 0-day or whether it's a vulnerability that's known, it doesn't really matter in my opinion, because you can have a lot of the email phishing protection, and that's great. At the end of the day, user's going to click a link, it's going to open up a browser. And I want to know what browsers are in use so that I can go patch those first. And I think that's the kind of strategies we need to be talking about and implementing, rather than spending time writing scripts and trying to analyze this data and having these subjective conversations.
Well, to add to that, Paul, I mean, you talk about protecting the browser. The way the endpoint security tools are built today, they're mostly rule-based for memory defense. So if the attackers are bypassing these rules, they're cracking the browser and no alerts are happening. So Vicarious's patchless solution is really targeted at complementing the endpoint protection suites to say, hey, you've defined bad and you're assuming everything else is good. And, we're here to define good and block the bad. So these patchless solutions, I think, are the final piece to the puzzle, where most companies are not able to protect this attack surface.
Agreed. Jeff, Lee, did you have questions, comments?
Well, the interesting thing about conversations like this, I keep getting back into flashbacks when we were having arguments about, I've been on both sides. I don't want you patching my system because it's going to break things and stop the world. And then I go and got to the other side saying, hey, man, do you know how vulnerable you are? And I got the pushback. So I just sit there thinking about how nice it is with all the stuff they're offering. And I'm wondering, have we still got people stuck in the mud about patching?
Oh, yeah. I mean, what we hear today is that coverage for third-party applications is all over the board. I mean, there's a wide disparity between the vendors. Today, in the POVs we've done, we haven't had anybody tell us that our coverage is less than anybody else. So right now, we hear that our third-party coverage is far superior than the market is used to. But that's a big problem. If you don't have a good asset inventory, you don't know all the third-party apps on the box, and you don't know all the stuff that applies to those third-party apps, you've got a whole lot of attack surface not even identified. It's just sitting out there. So again, this machine data, this automation, it empowers you to solve all these problems.
Are there any of your patchless options that can help that a bit?
Yeah, so you made two valid points. You said, listen, sometimes I can't patch and sometimes I want to patch everything. That's why we offer both. I mean, we want to offer you a solution for things that you can't patch, or things you don't want to patch, or maybe the patch has never come out and you still got to, defend that attack surface. But we also want to let you, roll out the recommended remediation, whatever the vendors are telling you to do, the third-party remediation, let's give you the opportunity to get that out there. So I think you have to have both as a vulnerability management program, because you're always going to have both objections in an environment. There's always going to be those use cases.
So I was thinking about the use case with some developers that they are using a particular framework that's got some pretty good sized vulnerabilities, and they're using an old version of it, and they're pushing back, about the rewrite to use the patched version, the fixed version. How do we approach that?
We would do a binary analysis and understand the code, and then offer patchless solutions around that binary analysis. And all that is done through automation. We have the cloud-first platform that's going to gather that data and provide that analysis to us, and then we can offer patchless solutions around those problems.
Yeah, and I think it's a good time to share with you guys like how easy it is. So I have here like a very easy use case of what we're exactly doing. So that's our automation part. This is the actions you can take: patch, patchless, OS update. We also added the ability to run scripts. So mitigations for things like what happened now with SolarWinds, when you need to remove certain DLL from a certain place on the disk, are also applicable for mitigation here. So on this example, I took Heartbleed with the vulnerable version. So you just select it. Of course, you have all the annoying settings of patch, like reboot, etc. And then you can also add scripts that are associated mostly around collateral stuff that are involving the patch. So for example, if you upgraded OpenSSL, you're probably going to need to change some configuration files. So you can also add it here. Of course, it can also be added based on the operating system you're running. From that moment on, it's pretty straightforward. You can start with the staging environment. You can start with the production environment. You can do a wide organization-wide deployment, but it's up to you how you're going to do it. And from the moment you do that, this activity will happen on a periodical basis, meaning that we're going to try to do that every once in a while. And we're also adding triggers, like more interesting triggers. For example, every time there is a critical CVE and you don't have a patch, automatically wrap the patch list. When the patch is out, start propagating the patch. Start with this group of computers. As Clayton said before, we can also see if you have crash dumps, if something changed in the behavior of the software because of the patch. So if we see that the acceptance rate of this patch is high, we're going to go to a bigger group of computers, then go to a organization-wide installation. But going back to the point where we started from, we're talking here about Gen 3 or Gen 4. Companies are still struggling with the basics. So I think that providing this kind of solution and not trying to tailor, not trying to take 2 or 3 products, tailor them together and hope that they will work. It's not about the products. The products probably work. It's about the process that is broken, and we don't think that orchestration will solve that. It's something that needs to be bottom up. It's something that needs to come. The change must be more radical than we think.
Orchestration does not solve the machine data question. I think that's the hopefully the bullet point we leave you guys with. Orchestration's nice. It certainly brings more value out of what you have, but you have a data decision problem, and we can improve the automation, the collection around that.
Michael, I just had a question on something you were just showing just now. Is it typically when we see a patch come out, we may monitor forums, monitor Twitter, email a message our friends, be like, hey, were you brave enough to install that patch? Like, how's it going? Because I haven't put it in my environment yet. Is that something you've automated, or is that something that you can put feedback into Topia to put in your environment?
Yeah, so we're tackling in two different ways. The first way is to collect external sources. So, for example, we're collecting things like patches that are high impact, that are going to significantly impact and reduce risk. We're monitoring activity on Twitter. For example, if a certain CVE and as a result the patch that is attached to the CVE is being tweeted out on Twitter, we're going to add it to the system. We actually have an X tag that's called tweeted CVEs, so you will be able to see that. But and the second part, and I think that this is something pretty unique, and I also want to share it with the audience because this is something we built for the community. We also added the ability to view and to browse on our website all the vulnerabilities and all the patches that are available out there. And we're also starting to gather this information from the public. So we're also going to have, I'm just going to show it. I hope I will find someone here. So for example, if a vulnerability has a patch and it broke your environment, you will be able to do thumbs down. And then the system will take this data that we're aggregating from our website and tell you, okay, listen, 60% of the people that has used this patch said that it broke something on their environment. So apart from the severity of the patch, you will also have the potential impact that this patch is going to impose on your environment. Afterwards, after you propagate the patch, after the patch is installed, we also have ways to understand that the patch has changed something in the system. For example, if we're talking about things like Python or Java, it's probably easier to check because you can check for crash dumps, you can check from extensive log writing and things like that. For the rest of them, for the endpoint software, you can probably do that by asking your users. You can start, for example, what we see organizations are doing is that they're starting from the IT. They are deploying the patches first for the IT team, and then if everything goes smooth, they go to a wider deployment. So why not automate this? Like you can have the IT team having a certain patch for 2 weeks, asking them, did Chrome change in the past 2 weeks? Yes, no. If it did, you're probably not going to want to continue with the deployment. If it didn't and the acceptance rate is higher, it should happen automatically, but the deployment organization-wide can happen in a matter of in a matter of seconds. It doesn't need to be someone pressing this button. It's something that needs to be fully automated.
No, it's really cool. I like the crowdsourcing. Provided you're checking for bots, so if I have an exploit for something and I'm going thumbs down on that vulnerability, so no one fixes it, right?
It's about the patch, less about the vulnerability. Did this patch broke your environment like that?
Yep. No, that's really cool. In terms of getting a demo or a trial, what's that process look like if folks want to try this out? I believe they need to engage with you to get a demo and also get issued a trial. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. No. Go ahead.
You can just hop out on the website, click the trial button at the top right hand of the screen, and sign up for a free trial. I mean, we want to offer this to everybody, especially your viewers. So just hop out to our website, take a look at the top right hand of the screen, fill out the form. If you want to run everything yourself, we're not going to bother you. If you want our help, we're happy to help you. But yeah, we want to offer this first-class experience to the whole community.
That's awesome. And is the trial, other than being a time-based trial, is it limited in any capacity?
I think these things are up for discussion. We don't want to enforce any limits. We want to show as much value as somebody needs to see. So if they want to do an assessment of a population and environment, let's do that. Let's talk about what that looks like, and we'll be happy to help.
Gotcha. Is it limited as like number of hosts you can install it on, or it's not?
No, the cloud tenant has no limits. So if you want to apply an Active Directory rule and apply this to all your endpoints and groups or the environment, and again, we want to show you as much value as you want to see, and the more stuff you touch, the more you're going to see. That one of the enterprise customers we met with, they joked yesterday. They said every week we see more and more and more and more that we had no idea. Because this is a complex conversation. We're not going to solve this in an hour. We're going to continue to show you things until you just say, listen, you guys know more about this than everybody else, so help me.
Yeah, I can imagine it give us some time to collect usage statistics, right? That's not just going to pop up automatically, right? That's something that has to be collected over some time. So,
in the course of 1 hour, you will see behavioral data like network activity and usage and open ports and things like that. It's pretty quick.
That's awesome. For folks that want to learn more, you can go to securityweekly.com/vicarious. Michael and Clayton, thanks for coming back on Security Weekly. It was nice having you both.
Thanks, Paul. Pleasure to be here.
You always have the best host, Paul, and you always do a great job. Thank you for having us.
Well, thank you. I do encourage our listeners to go get a free trial. I think I'm going to do the same. So you should too. With that, we'll take a short break, come back with Ming Chow. Stay tuned.